Joining me right now, Paul Viollis. He is host of the Security Brief and CEO of the Viollis Group International, and Bruce Klinger. He's senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation and former CIA Deputy Division Chief for Korea. Good to see you both.
Good to see you, Troy.
All right, Bruce, starting with you, what are we talking about here? Is he threatening essentially full-out, destruction of this regime and, unfortunately, perhaps all the casualties that come with it?
We're not really sure. Each day comes a new comment or tweet, and we're trying to parse the last one the day before. He seems like he's drawn some red lines, even earlier in the year, that North Korea has crossed over. So he certainly seems to be telegraphing a preventative attack, or we don't know if it's just a good cop, bad cop. H.R. McMaster, the National Security Advisor, earlier this week said that the president had directed the government to come up with at least the option of a preventative attack, seeing that North Korea having the capability to hit the United States with a nuclear weapon was intolerable. So every day we're a little bit more uncertain as to whether the North Korea is inching its way closer to an attack.
Paul, how do you see this sort of playing out? It's right now in a rhetoric type of war, right? Each side upping the ante with the other. Many have said, well, we should have a more diplomatic approach. We shouldn't be saying these things. And there's been a lot of criticism leveled against our president for some of the things he has said. However, Paul, I would only point out that, being nice and saying nice things, it hasn't worked.
Trish, I'm with you 100%. Let's just say this for what it is. Military response strategy is based on two things: capability and intent. We know that this guy in North Korea has leveled off 12 tests this year. We know from intelligence sources that he's holding at least 60 nuclear weapons. And now he's saying he's going to fire 4 missiles over Japan towards Guam, where we have 160,000 Americans living there at 2 military bases. We need to understand it takes less than 40 minutes for one of his missiles to hit the United States. If the president wasn't taking the position where he is right now, he'd be remiss. He's doing exactly what he needs to do.
Isn't it basically what everyone's position is, though, Bruce? I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, and this is why I don't appreciate all the criticism, frankly, from the left right now, Bruce, because we need to be a united front against this madman in North Korea. So I don't think it's appropriate for the likes of Chuck Schumer or others to be calling this language bombastic. I think everybody has their own tone, and certainly this president has a different tone than maybe other people, but I think they're all delivering the same message. And this is part of what the State Department was trying to make clear today. Everyone's on the same page, at least in this administration. Do you differ with that?
Well, I think the president's intent in his message was to send signals, signals to Seoul and Tokyo of resolve to defend ourselves and our allies, signals to Pyongyang of that you should stop from continuing your development of the ICBM, although they may already have achieved that, and signals to China that it should do more to implement, say, required UN sanctions, because otherwise the paths we're going down a very dangerous path. But the signals sent isn't always the signals received. Our allies are increasingly nervous about uncertainty about what the U.S. will do.
But don't you want that, Bruce? I mean, to a certain extent, I would think you would want to keep the world on edge, because you don't want them thinking that this administration is going to pull a President Obama and allow the creation of all of these nuclear weapons. Don't you want to convince them that there's a ramification, a consequence?
You don't necessarily want your allies to be nervous and uncertain if the U.S. is going to initiate a war, which we'll have. Back when I was in the agency and we did war games, it was the alliance always won, but it was at the cost of hundreds of thousands.
Right? I mean, China's theoretically our friend. China theoretically is willing to put sanctions on North Korea. They signed that big $1 billion sanction package. But we don't really know whether sanctions will work, because we don't really know whether China is willing to follow through.
Well, what we need to do is divorce law enforcement from diplomacy. We can continue to cajole and implore and coerce and pressure China to do the required UN sanctions. We know they're always going to disappoint us. But we need to fully endorse and implement and enforce U.S. law. So far, we're still pulling our punches on secondary sanctions. We did sanction one Chinese bank a few weeks ago. That was the first time in 12 years. But you talk to people who work sanctions in the U.S. government, they'll say, yeah, for years I've had lists of Chinese and North Korean entities violating U.S. law. We're allowed to bring out a few entities after each provocation. We put the rest back in the drawer. So I'm hoping that first bank that the administration sanctioned is just the first of many, but so far we haven't seen that.
There's much more that can be done, and there's much more that should be done. And I think before we actually take a step towards all-out war, we should be working extraordinarily hard, Paul, to make sure that we have explored every single avenue. And I don't think we've even so much as scratched the surface, because you know what? China is allowing this guy to exist. And we need to put the pressure on China. We need to say enough. They need to know that we mean business.
No, there's no question about that, Trish. But by the same token, we can't sit back and wait to see what China is going to do and what our other allies are going to do. The President of the United States has the sole responsibility. The biggest part of his job description is to protect the United States of America. End of story. And we've got a guy in North Korea that says he wants to lob nuclear missiles towards the United States. Some may say, well, he won't do it. That's all. That's a big dice to roll at that point. He is doing what he needs to do. He's sending a decisive message. It needs to be clear. You start going down that road, you've got to remember something. The United States houses the greatest intelligence services in the world. We're going to know way beforehand. And he's just basically saying, we're not going to let you get that close to us. We're going to be preemptive. Don't go down that road. So, however that may be being perceived, it's a very straight message. And again, the president would be remiss if he was not taking this.
I mean, one option is to push China. And I don't think we've, as I said, scratched the surface of what we can actually do to push China. So that's one option. You've got the military option. Bruce, given your background there with North Korea, given what you know about the intelligence gathering, is there enough confidence that we actually, from a military perspective, could go in and target what we need to target if we're trying to take out his nuclear arsenal?
Well, it depends on what your target set is. Some would advocate taking out a single missile in midair, and others would say take out a single launcher on the ground. Others would say ensure that they don't complete the development of an ICBM. That could require bombing mobile missile units, mobile storage sites, production facilities, research facilities. The more targets you hit, the higher the likelihood of a conflict, including an all-out war.
Right. And let's not forget that they can move a lot of this stuff around, correct?
Exactly. Right. And as I said, is when we did war games, it was hundreds of thousands of casualties, and that's before we thought they had nuclear weapons that can reach the 25 million people in Seoul and the 35 million people in Tokyo. So any kind of military attack, it does create the potential for escalation. And even before that is miscalculation. You have South Korea, at least under the previous administration, saying they have preemptive capabilities, and they would initiate those on detecting signs or perceived signs of North Korea hostilities. North Korea said they would preempt the preemption. And then the more that North Korea brags about and demonstrates its nuclear capabilities could lead the U.S. to feel like it needs to lean far forward. So you have three militaries in close proximity. There's a lot of danger of someone stumbling across a red line.